What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back to start a new deep dive. And indeed, I wanted to give a big shout out to friend and now champion of the channel. I think it's Chafic Itani. If I'm saying that wrong, I really do apologize. I'll try to get it right. Nevertheless, yeah, he shared a large number of singles from Arabesque, which I didn't realize before this was shared with me, but apparently this was the group Sandra was in before she became a notable solo star. And indeed, I was reading something about her. I've been reacting to her tunes for a few months now. But I was recently reading that in some countries, like on continental Europe, she actually outsold Madonna during the '80s when Madonna was ascending to the top of the pop music world. So I found that very interesting. But again, what I learned not only through the information that was shared with me, once again, shout out to you. But yeah, I did a little checking online just to look at some of these things in some different places like on Discogs and yeah, ultimately the beginning of this group, there's a lot of turnover. There were a number of people who came in, were in the group for a short amount of time. I think a couple of the singers left because they got pregnant and they didn't want to go on tour. But eventually in 1979, I think 17-year-old Sandra came in and they made her the lead. So yeah, again, I know who Sandra is to a limited extent, and I've come to understand Michael Cretu and his involvement in the Enigma project, which again, Enigma's Return to Innocence is a track I knew going way back to when it came out, but I didn't know who Sandra was. I didn't know about Arabesque. It was just this devoid of context tune that made a big impact, and again, I know that track has a very complicated legacy, like legally and so on. But yeah, ultimately, years later, I was able to start going through Sandra's material. Once again, shout out to the champions of the channel. But yeah, recently, friend of the channel, again, Chafic Itani, I hope I'm getting that right. But yeah, he reached out via Patreon, and he offered this up to go through. So I'm excited to hear it. I did read that they're seen as like a West German disco act. Like they came to prominence during the notable disco wave of the late 70s. I did read also that they were huge in Japan. That was like their biggest explosion, and that happened like right after Sandra joined, I think in 1979. I'm trying to remember the name of the producer they work with. I have the document out, so give me one sec. The producer they work with is Jan Frankfurter, or Eric Lieberman. I'm not sure. I can't read like the German alphabet, and there's like a German letter in there, so I'm not sure what his real name is, but apparently he went by Jan Frankfurter, which is admittedly funny. So yeah, Marianne Nagel proposed a girl group, and there were two other members who came in, Michaela Rose and Karen Ann Tepperis. But yeah, apparently Michaela Rose was the only one who stayed, and then there were a few other people who came and went, but eventually they did a track called Hello Mr. Monkey, and so they went on tour in Japan, and that is where eventually in '79 I think Sandra joins them. Yeah, it's a little ambiguous in terms of the timeline, but yeah, it seems like once she came in, they became a much bigger group, and ultimately, rode the disco wave, if you will. So, yeah, curious to hear, what it sounds like. I know Sandra's voice now, and indeed, there's been a couple songs where it's like, oh wow, like this is a crazier voice than I realized when I heard the bits and pieces, from an Enigma tune. But again, we'll hear two other voices. I noticed, like, I saw some of the like cover art on their albums and so on, and it looks like they kind of like have a visual aesthetic too, and like matching outfits and so on. So yeah, I imagine they have a stage presence, and perhaps like if not a formal dance routine, at least some sort of like kinetic motion synchronized, is what I would guess based on the aesthetic of what the look was. So I figured it would make sense to start with a track from the earliest phase before Sandra came in, just to maybe get a sense of what it sounded like in the earliest days, maybe then doing the track that I guess, Hello Mr. Monkey, I think that, that's the track that it says in that biography that was really a big hit. I'm not even remembering if that's the correct name now. Yeah, Hello Mr. Monkey. So the surprising overnight success of Hello Mr. Monkey in Japan So they scheduled an immediate tour. Okay, so yeah, I figured it would make sense to do that. So I wanted to listen to a tune at least as far back as '78, and one of the ones that immediately stuck out in the track listing here is Friday Night. You know, it speaks to going out, it speaks to parties, clubs, discos, discotheques. So it makes me think of, you know, the type of environment that this music speaks to, that real, like, you know, dancing with strangers and a, you know, a hot, like, dark dance floor, and, you know, really showing off your moves and feeling other people's vibes. It feels like that kind of idea when I see Friday Night as the title of a track. So perhaps it'll be more complicated. Again, you know, I'm just getting into their music. This will be the first track, so I have no sense of, you know, whether to expect some curveballs or unexpected twist in the songs. But, you know, on the surface of it, it sounds like, you know, there's going to be a party or at a discotheque, so you know, let's get ready to dance and feel the night. So let's see if that's what this is. This is Arabesque. The tune is Friday Night, and it's from 1978, and it's one of many singles that we will be able to go through from this group. I'm on board with that. Those string synths are really a key piece. It feels like slightly slower groove disco. Like, it's not super slow, but it has a kind of a down-tempo smoothness to it. these other singers, you know, I don't really have a sense for who's doing lead there. Nevertheless, they sound good together. I enjoy the groove of the tune. Again, it wasn't like slow by any means, but you know, compared to some other disco tunes I've heard, it had a bit more of like a down-tempo smoothness, as I think I said. And yeah, I enjoyed, there were some, you know, funky guitar bits here and there. The string synths really were the key feature as I heard it. That I think really like set the nice tone for the track overall. And yeah, it was, you know, it sounds like a disco track. And I think thematically it was pretty similar to what I was thinking. You know, they wish every night was a Friday night. It did sound a little more personal about like kissing someone and specifically them holding you tight with all your might and so on. Not necessarily like, hey, I'm, you know, dancing with lots of good-looking people and so on. It felt a little more, you know, one-to-one. But either way, it did feel like it's about being on the dance floor on a Friday night and just, you know, really letting go and enjoying it. So yeah, cool opener. Looking forward to the rest of the Arabesque tunes. There's like 52 tunes in here or something. There's a whole bunch of tunes. So we got a lot to go through. And again, I'll keep going through Sandra's solo stuff at the same time. So it'll be a nice, like, you know, jumping back and forth in time a little bit and hearing, you know, maybe similarities, differences, and so on. But again, as far as I know, none of those voices there was Sandra, because I believe she came in '79. That's what I read in the biography, and this is a '78 track. So if I'm wrong about that, correct me. But again, I don't think we actually heard Sandra there. So in any case, yeah, I'll probably work through a bit chronologically. You know, go through the ones from the late '70s, and then we'll eventually get into the '80s tunes. So in any case, let me know what you think. I will see you next time. Peace.